Hello everyone, welcome to our module 7. So first of all, excuse my voice. I have caught a cold and it's all in my throat and I'm quite hoarse, so I'm hoping that you can hear me okay. At this point, we are just finishing up your research report, so hopefully you have found your sources. Remember, we are looking for experts out there in the field who have written about the behavior we studied or we identified in our autoethnography. And so once we have those sources and we've read them and become familiar with them, please continue to do that. If you haven't, get familiar with these articles. Then we're going to turn to the writing of this synopsis, especially the introduction. And so if you look at the instructions right here, I'm not going to open them up, but please review them, especially when it turns to the writing of the essay. This introduction needs to introduce the reader to the behavior, needs to introduce the reader to the idea that you have, that you are presenting them with a synopsis of research. It needs to actually introduce the synopsis of research, and it needs to provide at least a couple common points of discussion that you have identified among the different authors. So in other words, little points that they have in common in their articles. And so I'm going to pull up the student example right here and look this over so you can see we've got the introduction here. Here, let me make it a little bigger. It's a little too big. We've got the introduction there on the first page, and then it gets into each of the synopsis sheets. But this first introduction introduces the idea of the topic. It provides context to the reader so that it gently invites them into the world of globalization of language. And then it gets into some of the common points of discussion. And this author chose to do it this way. This author chose to bring in these different points and then simply add in citations of the authors who talked about that. And so this opening point, Hitchens talked about that. This second point that they describe, Sindano talks about this. And so here's where some synthesis happens. This third point, both Turin and Woods talk about that. And also Turin and Woods both talk about this final point. You can do it that way. That's absolutely fine. You can also mention authors in the writing specifically. If you want to talk about something specific, a specific point that Woods and Turin talked about, write it out in a sentence. In their research, both Turin and Woods noticed this, or talked about this, or wrote about this. So you can do it several different ways. And then you're kind of finalizing the introduction by introducing the upcoming synopsis, letting the reader know what they are about to read. And so if we get back here into our module 7, I have a video lecture right here that talks about a fantastic method that will help us identify those common points of discussion, because we have, 4 sources, 4 pretty dense articles, hopefully, and in each of those, the authors are making several different points. How in the world do you wrap your mind around all of that information and organize it into a conversation? There is a SOAR mapping method that will help you do that. And so I'm not going to start this, obviously, but this is a lecture where I explain that SOAR mapping method. And I also have the slides from that lecture right down here, so you can go through and review them later on or rewatch this. And so let's get back here into the module. There is a template right here, this SOAR map template. Let's see. And this is just a way where you will take a sheet of paper, preferably a larger sheet of paper, and you will just write this out. You will write out the information from your sources. Now this template, so this is an example that you will follow. You will follow this pattern. This includes 5 different sources, but you only need 4 for this class. And you will write the author's name, then the type and the title and all of the points, and then you will start looking for connections. I explain all of this in that video. And once you do that, then the submission for this week is a photograph of that map. I want you to take a photograph of that map and place it here so I can see that. And by the end of it, you can see some student examples here. You will have identified 2, 3, or 4, 4 is a lot, 2 or 3 common points of discussion that you can mention in that introduction that you have identified before your reader even gets to the synopsis. Okay? Reach out to me if you need more explanation on any of this, but have a great week.